You're not him.
The film opens at a crime scene with a victim discovered deceased on a sofa. Investigators search for clues and note a precise, small wound on the back of the neck. Officer Joe reports to his superior that again, there is no evidence, no DNA, fingerprints, or traces. Joe, concerned about the stalled investigation, meets his skeptical partner Catherine. She argues that bringing in an outsider wastes resources. Joe insists the man is a capable former colleague and friend. Though doubtful, Catherine agrees to meet him before judging. They drive to a remote location to meet John, who has lived in isolation for 2 years since his daughter's death from cancer. Joe enters alone to speak with John, asking for help with the case, but John refuses. When a call comes to the car, Catherine brings the phone inside, and Joe introduces her. After Joe steps out, Catherine shows John the files, explaining protocol now permits external consultation. She details 3 identical murders. When she attempts a handshake, John hesitates. Upon her touching his shoulder, he has a psychic vision of blood flowing from her head, revealing his ability to see a person's future through touch. After Catherine and Joe depart, John reconsiders and offers his help. At the office, Joe explains John's precognitive gift. Catherine states she doesn't believe in paranormal abilities and asks if she offended him. John calmly replies he feels similarly about doctors, claiming they care only for money. When Catherine suggests he hasn't met a good doctor, John asks, "Is that what Sam Matt said to you?" Naming her real doctor, proving his insight. In a team briefing, Catherine explains each victim was killed by a 5-inch needle to the medulla oblongata, causing instant, painless death. The crimes are flawless. No DNA, hair, footprints, or witnesses, despite secure locations. A mysterious note was left behind. When John handles it, he visions the killer and the crime, showing he can also see the past by touching objects. Joe takes John to the first crime scene. A 79-year-old woman found in a chair with a note on her table. While there, Joe receives a call and steps away. John shows Catherine a card from the scene. She identifies it as a puzzle asking, "Who am I?" Speculating the killer may have a personality disorder, yet the murders are too meticulous for someone unstable. Joe returns and they leave without findings. Later, at a food truck, John and Joe reminisce. When Joe touches John's shoulder, John has a painful vision of an operating theater and Joe screaming, revealing Joe secretly suffers a fatal illness. That night, John reflects on his daughter's death and his visions of Joe's illness and Catherine's head injury. Joe then arrives, reporting an anonymous tip with an address. The team enters the house, finding a note with 4 solar times. Catherine thinks it biblical, but John recognizes it matches their entry time. The killer predicted their arrival. They discover a woman murdered similarly in a bathtub. An officer estimates her death hours prior, but John states the killer left long ago, having foreseen their coming. Joe asks John to touch the victim. John sees the murder but only warns Joe to avoid the water, without explanation. The husband, David Raymond, is suspected. During interrogation, he is distraught, mentioning a note he wrote to his wife, Victoria, saying he was leaving her. John, handling a pen from David's home, has a vision and enters, asking Joe and Catherine to leave. John confronts David. Victoria was mentally ill. David concealed that his new lover was a man, and David has HIV. David breaks down. Outside, John explains to Joe. Victoria plans suicide after reading the letter. The killer ended her life first. John warned about the bathwater due to HIV contamination. He realizes the killer isn't merely murdering. He's sparing victims future agony. Victoria, also HIV positive, faced a slow death. The next morning, Joe hosts John for breakfast. Joe's wife mentions seeing John's ex-wife, Elizabeth, who still loves him. Joe then asks John's professional assessment. John theorizes all victims were terminally ill, saved from prolonged suffering. To test this, he and Catherine visit parents of a young victim, Robert, inquiring if he was sick. The father denies it, but the mother, angry, demands if the killer is caught. Catherine requests an autopsy. The mother resists, but John, speaking as a doctor who witnessed slow deaths, including his daughters, convinces them. Robert's body is exhumed. During the autopsy, a tumor is found in Robert's brain. He was terminally ill, unknown to his parents. Simultaneously, John receives an urgent fax. He reads it, becomes disturbed, and leaves. Catherine follows, demanding answers as he packs. John repeats the killer's riddle. Who am I? What do I do? And how do I live? He reveals it's a line from an opera he was listening to when Catherine first brought him the files. The killer knew everything, the music, the request for help, even their 4:16 p.m. apartment entry. John shows the fax. Dr. Clancy, check the cerebellum lobe. Sent before the tumor's discovery, it proves the killer shares John's power but is stronger, seeing further ahead and setting a trap. John states the killer is ahead of them. Catherine asks if he quit facing an equal. John says, no, he is much stronger. No one can stop him. He questions if they should, since victims were dying anyway. Catherine retorts, would he feel the same if his daughter were a victim? She apologizes, but John, angered, reveals her secrets. A teenage pregnancy, giving the child up for adoption, and her hidden loneliness. Stunned, Catherine is heartbroken. John then visions her head injury again and urges her to leave, fearing imminent danger. A new body is found, brutally dismembered, unlike the neat prior murders. John tries to flee by bus but is haunted by visions of Joe and Catherine. Joe finds him, pleading to stay, citing a clue. Poison on flowers in Victoria's bath traced to a park. There, John finds cut flowers and points to a trash can holding clothing from the recent victim. A tracking dog leads to an apartment building. A man inside shoots Joe, then jumps from a window. John and Catherine pursue. John uses his power to foresee the stolen taxi and a coming crash where the man would shoot him. By altering his actions, John avoids the fatal shot. Catherine appears and kills the man. However, John sees he isn't the true psychic killer. At the hospital, Joe confirms the man was a decoy. The real killer orchestrated events. Joe admits his stage for cancer, stating the killer did him a favor. Dying in the line of duty ensures his family's pension and his son's education. Joe urges John to smile and return to Elizabeth, then passes away. At the funeral, John hugs Joe's son, seeing a bright future for him. Later, at a bar, the real killer, Charles Ambrose, confronts John. Charles explains his philosophy. He foresees those destined for painful deaths and acts as an angel of mercy, killing them painlessly first. He admits ensuring Joe's heroic death to aid his family, noting Joe had 73 suffering days left. When John considers alerting a nearby officer, Charles warns he's armed. John visions the officer and a waitress dying if he intervenes. To create a safe distraction, John smashes a plate on Charles's head. In the chaos, Charles escapes. Using a witness description, Catherine sketches Charles. John psychically tracks him to a house where Charles leaves poisoned champagne for a terminally ill man celebrating a promotion. Charles argues the man would otherwise father a diseased child tomorrow. John counters they aren't God, but Charles says he dislikes how God works, then leaves. John saves the man by calling an ambulance. The FBI locates Charles's home. There, Catherine finds a projector with a video of Charles addressing her directly. John doesn't want you to do this, but you will, because it has already been decided. Leaving the hospital, John remembers his daughter Emma, realizing Charles wants him to recall her death. Charles goes to a train station, identifies himself to police to lure the FBI, and boards a train. John follows. Charles clears the carriage, holding John at gunpoint. He says they have 7 minutes. John visions Catherine entering and being shot. To save her, he must time shooting Charles and pushing her aside perfectly. Charles, also dying, asks John to continue his work. John refuses. At the next station, Catherine rushes in. As Charles fires, John pushes her and shoots Charles. A bullet grazes John's ear. He falls, blood on Catherine. Charles is dead. Later, Catherine visits John in the hospital, saying she enjoyed working with him. John asks her to deliver a letter. In the final scene, John meets Elizabeth in a garden. He flashes back to his daughter Emma screaming in agony, begging for the pain to end. The vision reveals John filling a syringe with a fatal dose and administering it through her feeding tube, ending her suffering peacefully. The film concludes with this revelation. John, like Charles, mercy killed his own daughter. This response is AI-generated, for reference only. Dlina slishkam bolsha stal. The movie starts at a crime scene with a victim dead on a sofa. Investigators find a small, precise wound on the neck's back. Officer Joe reports a lack of evidence to his boss. Joe meets his skeptical partner, Catherine. He insists on bringing in John, an old friend who has been isolated since his daughter's death. They visit John, who initially refuses to help. When Catherine touches him, John has a psychic vision of her future injury, revealing his ability. John later agrees to help. At the office, he proves his power by knowing personal details about Catherine. The team learns the victims were killed instantly by a needle to the medulla oblongata, with no evidence left behind. John touches a note from a scene and visions the killer. John and Joe visit the first crime scene. Joe gets a call and steps away. John shows Catherine a puzzling card from the killer asking, "Who am I?" Later, John has a vision revealing Joe has a fatal illness. That night, Joe gets a tip. The team raids a house exactly when a note predicts. They find another victim. John visions the murder and warns Joe to avoid contaminated water. They interrogate the victim's husband, David. John psychically uncovers that David has HIV and wrote a breakup letter. John explains the killer murdered David's wife to spare her future suicide and painful death from AIDS. John deduces the killer targets people facing terrible deaths. To test this, he gets permission to exhume a young victim, Robert. An autopsy confirms a hidden brain tumor. John receives a fax sent before the autopsy, correctly predicting the tumor's location. He realizes the killer has the same power but is stronger, foreseeing their every move. John tries to quit. An angry Catherine challenges him. He retaliates by revealing her secret. She gave up a child for adoption. He then visions her impending head injury again. A new, brutal murder occurs. The team tracks a clue to a park, then an apartment. A shooter injures Joe and flees. John and Catherine chase him. Using his power to avoid a foreseen death, John helps Catherine kill the shooter, who is just a pawn. In the hospital, dying Joe admits he knew John saw his illness. He says the killer did him a favor by ensuring his death provided for his family. Joe dies. The real killer, Charles Ambrose, meets John. He explains he kills people painlessly before their foreseen suffering. He orchestrated Joe's death. John creates a distraction, and Charles escapes. John psychically tracks Charles to a man's house. Charles is leaving poisoned champagne for the terminally ill man. He argues the man would otherwise father a sick child. John saves the man. The FBI finds Charles's home. A video message awaits, stating events are predestined. Charles lures them to a train. Alone with John, Charles reveals he is also dying and wants John to continue his work. John refuses. Catherine boards at the next stop. John visions her being shot. He times his move perfectly, shooting Charles and pushing Catherine to safety. Charles is killed. Later, recovering, John meets his ex-wife, Elizabeth, in a garden. A final flashback reveals the truth. As his daughter Emma lay dying in agony from cancer, John administered a fatal dose to end her suffering. He, like Charles, was a mercy killer,